I'm going to talk to you today about improving performance. A key issue for every organisation is the level of performance that you're able to expect and get from your workforce. So I want to give you some ideas and some tips about how you might go about improving performance in the workplace. And there are only 3 or 4 key messages. First of all, what is good performance? Have you defined it? You may know what it is in your head as a senior manager or a leader within your own organisation, but does everybody else share that? Often we make assumptions. We assume that because we know clearly what good performance is and what it looks like, everybody else must know that through some curious osmotic procedure. So, first of all, what does good performance look like? Have you defined it and have you communicated it? A couple of points on that. In this country, I think there's generally a bit of a tendency to concentrate on what we can measure, the tangible outputs, so quantitative measures about performance. How much of a particular product have we made, to what standard, and how many were returned because they weren't quite up to standard. But we shouldn't forget the qualitative measurements that we also need to make. So when we're thinking about a definition of good performance, it's not just the what, it's the how our people are performing that needs to be measured and needs to be measured against a clear definition of your view of good performance. The second key point is about how you measure it. Having got to the position where you know exactly what it is that you want from your individual members of staff as well as your teams, how do you go about measuring it? You may have already a number of metrics that you use, and I've already talked about the difference between quantitative and qualitative measures, but how clear are those to your workforce in general? How well are they described? How do people know whether or not they are working towards those measurements, and how do they know where they are in relation to those measurements? Think about the metrics that you use. Think about how they're published. Think about how they're embedded in the organisation and how well they're understood by everybody in the organisation, not just the favoured few right at the very top. The way in which you communicate those measurements is really important. That's the third really key point, I would say. The ways in which we can convey to people feedback about their performance are many and varied, but they fall into 2 main camps. First of all, there's the informal methods, and then secondly, formal. Let's talk about the informal stuff first of all. One of the key issues, I believe, of getting really good performance out of your staff is being honest and clear and timely with your feedback. There's no point in saving up all of the mistakes and all of the bad practice that you may have noticed and conveying that to an individual or indeed a team on Christmas Eve. That's not a good idea. If you're using your informal mechanisms, you should be giving instant feedback as and when you notice anything that really doesn't fit your definition of good performance. People won't remember what it was they were doing on the 3rd of November by the time you get to Christmas Eve. You need to tell them on the 3rd or at least the 4th of November. So make sure that you are able to offer those kinds of feedback. Do it appropriately, of course, but do it at the time. It will be much more meaningful. As human beings, we learn better in the moment through our experiences and experiential learning than we do by being ticked off 3 months down the line. Informal also means being positive about people. I've chosen to start with negative because we want to talk about improving performance. But actually, every time we give positive feedback, every time we build somebody's confidence and their self-belief, we help them also to improve their performance. So it's on both ends of the spectrum. And I would say that we're more likely to give negative feedback than positive as a cultural phenomenon in the UK. So think about that. Think about how often you say to people, that was a really good job. I noticed what you did yesterday and it was fantastic. That kind of feedback is really important. But from an organisation perspective, you also need to be paying attention to your formal feedback mechanisms. And those will include team meetings, formal written communications often from the senior leadership team, which say, congratulations everybody, the company's doing really well, and profits have improved, productivity has improved. But it might also be about saying, actually, the bar has been set at this level and we are some way from it. So here is the message, we need to work harder, we need to do things differently. Whatever the message is, it might be coming through a very formal mechanism. The most powerful and the most effective tool, though, I believe, is your appraisal system. You should have one. It's been accepted good practice for many, many years now. Not everybody does, but if you don't have one, think about it. The appraisal system is a formal, uninterrupted meeting between a manager and their direct reports that allows for really honest and effective two-way communication. It's one of those rare occasions when somebody in a management position should be sitting and listening to feedback that comes towards them as opposed to the feedback going in the other direction, and your appraisal scheme is important for that one reason alone. If we, as leaders and managers, don't hear the messages about what our staff are saying to us, we won't improve either. One of the most salutary moments in my entire working career was when a secretary told me 20 years ago that I was a complete nightmare to work with because I never told her where I was going, what I was doing. I just used to take off. I was always doing something terribly important, but she didn't know what I was doing. So she couldn't give decent advice to people who were ringing to ask where I was and at what time could I be expected back. My poor secretary had no clue. I hope I really learnt that lesson because I was preventing her from operating effectively as a member of my staff. So that two-way communication process through appraisal is vital, and it is one of your key tools for getting an improvement in performance. One of the key areas in order to support that improving performance is, of course, training and development for your workforce. A lot of time and attention is usually paid in most organisations to the training and development programme. And I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this, but what I would say is make sure it fits your performance framework. If you've got something that looks or sounds like a performance framework, it's important to have your training and development match whatever it is you're saying. I once worked in an organisation which professed itself to be based almost entirely on customer service, driving up customer satisfaction levels. But the training package for staff began with zero tolerance for any customer that proved to be negative or aggressive, dealing with complaints, how to escalate complaints, how to defuse tricky situations. So in the first instance, the training suggested to staff that they were likely to face vexatious, difficult and complaining customers rather than happy customers. And so I believe that what that created was almost a scenario where staff were on the defensive before they'd even opened their mouth or before, more importantly, a customer had broached any kind of communication with them. So that disconnect between the stated objectives and philosophy of the company was at variance with the training and development, caused confusion. And if I can take you back to the very start of this video, clarity about what you want and what good performance looks like needs to be reinforced and embedded in the other systems and processes, and particularly the training and development that you use for your staff. If all else fails, if you've been clear about your message, if you have got good metrics in place to measure it, if your feedback mechanisms are good, if your appraisal is working well, if your training and development is good, and people still are unable to deliver for you the level of performance that you're looking for, you need to be using your formal disciplinary or capability policies, because there is a point at which you can't afford as a business to have people who either don't or can't perform to the level that you're looking for. This is a last resort. I am suggesting to you that this is something that should not be happening on a regular basis, but it is something that you can utilise if everything else has failed. In summary, if you want to improve performance, you must be clear about what that good performance looks like. You must have proper measurement methods that allow you to be clear in your feedback to individuals and teams about what it is that they're doing and how well they're meeting your expectations. Your training, development and appraisal systems need to be spot on, and if all else fails, don't be afraid to use your disciplinary and capability procedures in order to exit people from the organisation who either can't or won't give you that improvement that you're looking for.